remember how to do this without spending 30 seconds here. Look at that. I remembered. There's StreamYard for you. Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubs at the Club, the Idaho Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I am your host, as most of the time, Dallas Hammer, joined by Brave, Bold, and Brian Marceau.
Good to be here, dude. I felt left out of the hat game, so decided to throw on the only hat I wear. Brimmed hats, like just the shape of my head, it doesn't matter what size brimmed hat I have. They all look like gigantic on me, so you'll never see me in one. So this is not a brimmed hat, but relatively rare sighting. Minus the fashion update, dude. Good to be here. Always game to talk Idaho sports. And I mean, we're kind of in the thick of the off. It's weird that the football off season never ends. We've got both basketball teams are making noise in comparison to last year for sure. So, as always, it's a good day to be a Vandal.
Brian, I'm mostly just focused on the microaggression you just committed against me. You have hair. Own that. Like, you don't need a hat. You have hair. I don't. Anyways, guys, we're talking Vandal football. Not a ton of updates for you this week, but we do have some exciting news. Breaking, as in breaking like a handful of days ago, Idaho has posted a job for special teams coordinator. Brian, I know that was a big point of contention last year. Special teams were Idaho's biggest strength when Thomas Ford was here as an assistant under Jason Eck, and then it continued to slide further and further as Thomas Ford left. As he comes back to the program, we all expected, special teams is going to be our saving grace once again. That did not happen last year, Brian. So Neil Fendall appears no longer to be the special teams coordinator, does appear to still be on staff as the safeties coach, but new special teams coordinator being hired.
Yeah, this is just another example to me of you don't win games in January, right? But if you were hoping that Thomas Ford's lessons from Idaho going 4-8 while having 4-1 score games, if you were hoping the lesson Ford took away was, yeah, we're just not good enough, guys, not at all, then you should be happy with this news. Thomas Ford's, to our understanding, he's pretty close with Neil Fendel, and this is probably a decision that would have been, in one sense, tough, and in another sense, not tough. Tough in the interpersonal sense, but not tough in the same sense that I don't think it was tough to figure out that Matt Linehan wasn't good enough. And I feel that, special teams and safeties were two groups where both of those groups, I think you'd say, underperformed. By the way, both coached by Fendel, but I guess from this, I'd say Thomas Ford does not believe that the issues with safeties was coaching. He believes it was personnel. And all our safeties from last year either graduated or portaled the hell out. So tabula rasa, which is I'm taking as good news in the safety room. But then the on the other end, it looks like Ford's math is no. Special teams, it was not just personnel. It was a systemic issue. So Ford changed up. So again, that's just like OC, tough and not tough at the same time. Interpersonally, maybe tough, but if you are objectively looking at results, you have to immediately land on, was it personnel or was it coaching? For these were two of the two position coaches where you got to say the group's wasn't good enough last year. So I think this is just exhibit 7,000 that Ford took away from last season, that the team was not remotely close to the standard he wants it to be at. So I take this as good news.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that, Brian. If you look at it, yeah, Idaho did not have the season they wanted last year. 4-8, obviously, some injuries to Joshua Wood took away two very winnable games against Northern Colorado and Eastern Washington. So, things break a little bit differently. This is a 500 ball club, which is still nowhere near what I think most people, especially us on this podcast, expected. So if you look at it now in the 6 weeks postseason or 2 months, however you want to call it, he's moved on from a Vandal legend at offensive coordinator. Demoted him in season. The coach we believe he's probably closest with, or at least one of the coaches he's closest with, has been essentially demoted, had the coordinator position taken away from him. I know there's been a lot of consternation in Vandal fandom about Thomas Ford and about, Jason Eck came in and revived the program, and then we're right back to shit again. Man, objectively looking at Thomas Ford, like, what else can the guy do? Now, yes, maybe things don't go very well this year, and it is okay, shit, you've played the reset coordinators and coaches card. That didn't work. What's next? But from where I'm sitting here on January 21st, I can't say Thomas Ford isn't doing everything possible to turn this program around. Hard decisions and hard conversations have been had and made, and that's all I can ask for when we're all hoping to see Vandal football have a big turnaround this year.
Yeah, this was not reshuffling the deck chairs this offseason. This was a complete 180 on the areas of need. So, look, we have another coach to get to, but look at the points of emphasis from Ford's pressers throughout the season. Offense, new coach, went complete 180 from young inexperienced guy connected to the program to, no, let's get a guy who knows what he's doing, who's kicked ass in multiple places.
Yep.
We'll see the direction to go with special teams, but also then on the defensive side, we know the pass rush was an area of deficiency. We got a DC who's openly talking about how pass rush absolutely has to get better. So no, I know you brought up the takeaway that may happen at the end of next year. Like, we're a million years away from that point. For me, my landing point is Thomas Ford in his final press conference during the regular season made it, he made the vow to be the hardest working coach in the offseason. He sounded like a guy committed to turning things around. And he looks like a guy who the first thing he did was take a damn long good look in the mirror And there's nothing really else to ask of a coach at this point. He's building his roster. We'll talk about that at some point, but a lot has changed about Idaho between the end of last season and where we are today, January 21st. So, we're still along for the ride for some of the other stuff. This will make spring football pretty goddamn interesting in my mind.
Yeah. Brian, there are currently 33 new Vandals on the roster this season. We'll get into a little bit more about that in just a second. But the other news in Vandal football world is hiring of another defensive assistant coach. This being, the named position coaches are essentially all filled, minus the special teams coordinator job. So this is, we're talking the low level assistants that are, essentially grad assistants and quality control, like those types of guys. Not to demean that at all, but just saying like, hey, the few positions that are left to fill here, other than special teams coordinator, are gonna be guys that don't have a ton of experience. And so that's what we run into today. Is it was announced shortly after our show last week, but Zion Tupuola-Fatui, former all Pac, actually 3-time all Pac-12 defensive end at UW. He played at UW while Ford was there. This does appear to be his first coaching job, Brian. The press release says, we're really excited to bring Zion on our staff. Ford says, we spent time together when he played at Washington. He had a really great career there. Excited to see him have that same success in the coaching profession. He's going to bring his knowledge of pass rush. His experience will help both of our defensive line coaches and, most importantly, the players. So reading between the lines there, or reading the lines that have been explicitly drawn there, it sounds like Tupuola-Fatui is going to be a defensive assistant focused on the pass rush, which, as most people saw the pass rush last year, all help is needed there, Brian.
Right. This is another point of a pass rush, as which as we've referenced already, dudes. Obvious emphasis of an obvious area of weakness last season, right? Well, we are now Ford's now hiring another coach where, in theory, improving the pass rush will be part of his point of emphasis. So if you're a fan who saw the deficiencies of last season, I feel like you should have essentially no choice but to be happy at this point that the things that Idaho did not do well last year, those have been clear areas of focus this offseason. So I don't think there's a single, there's not a quality control type of coach where you say, oh, hey, dude, we hired Robbie Hauk. Like, things are going to completely turn around for a fact. But, to me, the bigger deal is, okay, Idaho is spending money on the areas we were not as good as last year. That's a win, man.
Yeah, and that takes us, Brian, to, again, there's not a ton left to talk about Tupuola-Fatui, as again, this appears to be his very first coaching job, which again makes sense for being the assistant to there's already a defensive line coach and an edge rushers coach. Makes sense being the assistant to those guys. It doesn't necessarily need to be a guy with a ton of experience. But that takes us to, again, the roster construction as we're going into 2026. 20 freshmen, 5 junior college additions, and then 8 guys so far signed in the portal. We talked about a little bit of them last week, but since last week's show, there have been 2 new defensive ends added, Brian. Jamarian and Javen Augustus. Jamarian played at Northern Iowa. Javen played at Coastal Carolina. The 2 of them are twin brothers from Alabama, coming here to Idaho to play out their final season of their career. So with that, there's the 2 of them. There are the 2 transfer defensive ends that were announced the week before that we talked about on the show. So, and then obviously, the freshman, there's about a freshman at just about every position. So there are essentially 5 new faces in the room right now when you add in Newey Myers. But again, 4 of these transfers are 4 of these defensive ends are transfers. This is very obviously a position that the team is focusing on improving. As Ross Warren says in the comment section, not sure I saw any semblance of a pass rush last season. Nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, when we get close to the season, that's when we're going to start looking at individual guys and who may be emerging in the position groups. But I don't know what to say other than at this point, like, we're just kind of following the development of the roster. Earlier in the pre-portal era, I'm talking about the offseason. That's when we saw the JC guys and some of the D2 guys as well. And now we're starting to see the D1 transfers. just because of how last season shook out, guys, with new additions, I really want to actually see guys play before I'm talking about who is going to contribute where. But you look at other schools in the Big Sky. Montana is essentially going to be starting over completely on the defensive side of the ball once again, while also losing, one of their Michael Wortham Jr. graduates. It's a gigantic loss there. Montana State, big news for them keeping Justin Lamson and Taco Dowler. But once after Montana State won their title, they also saw their exodus of guys in the portal. We're just at the point where every single team, we don't really know who the hell they are at this point heading into the year. Mm-hmm. So just continue to follow. What I expect is that in not too long, I expect Idaho's probably going to have the majority of this roster in not too long, with the exception of, I don't think it'd be flooring to leave a few spots open for the portal just in case during spring ball, injuries, and just assessing what you have and then deciding what areas need to be buttressed. Mm-hmm. I think that's a template pretty much every school is going to take right now, until it gets to a point where it slows down. Is there like 7,000 players still left in the portal or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah. The way the portal works now, guys, the players cannot re-enter the portal. That window has closed, and it will be closed until January. No more spring window like there was last year, where we saw, again, if you were paying a ton of attention to the previous Vandals, you saw guys like Mark Hamper transfer to Wisconsin and then immediately bail out of Wisconsin and go to Cal. Like those types of things, you're not going to see as much because guys can't transfer out. However, that portal does not necessarily mean, January 16th it closed and you can't sign anybody else. Vandals are signing guys after the portal. Other teams are signing guys after the portal closed. Like that, there's a group of players in that portal looking for a chance. So it would make a lot of sense for that to be, hey, spring ball comes around and let's say one of the Augustus brothers blows a knee out. Yeah, shit, probably going to need to go find another defensive end. And fortunately for Idaho, with how many kids go into the portal and then never play football again, there are certainly guys to go grab out there if that type of thing happens. But
and I mean, the other part for us too is as far as why we talk about this the way we do, guys. And I'm looking at Crewhead 76 saying no Parham hype this year, please. Cosign, bud. I learned my lesson, man. Now I will say we didn't invent the Parham hype, but lesson learned. Crewhead also adds, I will hold all judgments on what we have until after week 2 next season. Utah game could be a bloodbath. And Sam Dane saying, so where should Idaho be in the preseason poll, and why does number 24 feel insultingly low? Sam 100% trolling me from the patreon.com/Tubs the Club, hashtag only Tubs Discord, where, look, we still have our chat going on constantly, even in the off season, even during football time. But Idaho being at number 24 in a pre-season poll was brought up as a discussion point. And my hot take was, good God, guys, we don't even have a roster. No, I don't care. I don't care what the January polls are when no one has their roster. But Sam, well done trolling me. Well done getting me to talk about something I tried to not talk about in the first place.
One last thing on that. Ross Warren in the comment section. Week 4 is the earliest we will know anything. Cal Poly, Utah, Abilene Christian, and Lamar. And then follow that up with Montana State. If Idaho's 3-1 headed into that Montana State game, I'm going to feel pretty good about this team, Brian. But again, we know Joshua Wood is going to be the quarterback. We have a pretty good idea who the offensive linemen are going to be. And beyond that, most of the rest of this roster is in complete flux. So it's pretty hard to project where Idaho can be, as we don't know who's going to be playing. Just how it works.
Yeah. Do you want to spend like 2 seconds talking about a couple of dearly departed guys?
Yes, but not quite yet. The other thing I wanted to point out in the portal, guys. So again, anybody that's a doom and gloomer that is not hearing Tubs at the Club all the time or is not part of our Patreon, the other signings that have happened this week are Landon Hammond and Tyrone Stewart. They're both a couple defensive backs. So that means Idaho has added 3 defensive backs in the portal, 2 defensive backs from junior college or Division II, and then again, the multiple defensive backs that are coming in as true freshmen. So Idaho very obviously targeting a couple specific things in the portal so far. the defensive ends and the defensive backs. There are a couple running backs and receivers that have come through as JUCO transfers, nobody from D1 transfer portal, but Idaho very obviously targeting the defense right now as buttressing the portal. Which, Brian, that leads us into talking about the dearly departed Vandals, because as you mentioned, Idaho's safeties are essentially wiped out. Idaho's defensive backs, for the most part, wiped out. Blendman graduated. Ricks is gone. Kinsey was hurt.
With Ricks out, and then we'll learn about Kinsey later, right? Like he's got to be healthy to play for the season. So I'm not talking about Ricks. I'm not talking about Kinsey. You're fine with the complete turnover at DB minus those two guys, right? Okay.
Yeah, completely agree. Obviously, would have loved to have had Caleb Ricks back. Like, hey, props to you for going and getting the pretend Pac-12 bag. Again, I still think you could have done what Andrew Marshall did and stick here for 2 years and get yourself into a Power 4 school and probably get drafted. Hopefully, for the kid, hopefully it works out for him. But I think we've seen what the recipe for portal success is for most players, and it's staying and building yourself at a school for a couple years. But again, we will litigate that again in a year. So Brian, we talked last week about the guys that have departed Idaho. Rocco Koch signed with NAIA Ottawa University of Arizona. Matthias McLean is at Wazoo. Dylan Lane went to Oregon State. Caleb Ricks, as we just discussed, Santiago State. I keep doing that every time we use the SDSU tag. Matt Irwin went to UCF. Oh, good for him. I did not expect that one. One of those safeties, was kind of shocked on that one. So we have a couple more players that have found homes. And unfortunately, outside of the three that we are about to talk about, every other Vandal in the portal has not found a home yet, at least has not tweeted or posted, or it has not been officially announced anywhere. So first one, Davis Fry, receiver. He's now at Division II Western Oregon. Will Cornelson, this is maybe not a painful one, but Will Cornelson transfers out of Idaho, ends up at Weber State. So, going to see him around the conference still again. Expect he'll probably get some playing time there, as he did have playing time at Idaho pretty consistently. And then lastly, Hayden John has announced his commitment. He didn't announce it publicly until today. It was just tweeted by UC Davis, but Hayden John has transferred to UC Davis, which notably, Brian, is not one of the 14 schools he posted on the graphic saying he had heard interest from, which were, again, 13 FBS schools and South Dakota State. UC Davis, not one of those schools. So any major thoughts on Fry, Cornelson, and John finding their new homes, Brian?
Yeah, I think Hayden John is an example of a case study for at least fans to understand the process of which, hey, I detailed my understanding last week, having talked to people who had children in the portal, and people who actually been in the portal, where when you see people announce they've heard from someone, that just means they got an automated message. If that doesn't immediately turn into an offer, it was a complete waste of time. The head coach might not even know that guy heard from that program. So Hayden John seems like a guy who was told by an agent that he could move on up. UC Davis is a good school. So I'm not trying to write off the academic part, but it's hard to talk about this and not sound caustic, guys. I'm fine losing Hayden John. I think that there's a lot of guys who are getting really shitty advice because NIL is essentially unregulated to the bone. That counts who gets to call themselves agents. So I don't know what the agent promised Hayden John in this process. I bet Hayden John was not promised, you can laterally transfer to a Big Sky school where you have a good chance of not playing. Ditto Will Cornelson. He lost his starting job at Idaho. Mm-hmm. So, he was a solid contributor, happy to have him while he's here. But once you're in the portal, you actualize what you actualized. And Idaho loses a depth piece at linebacker who is now moving on to Weber State to play at a school that's taken a huge gamble on a high school coach. Enjoy Ogden. They do have a beautiful stadium. So, I hope that works out for you. But
handful of their fans are pretty good people.
Yeah, exactly. I have to assume both these guys thought they were going to bigger places. Otherwise, this is not an improvement. Even if both these guys stay at Idaho, Idaho's probably invested in their development at these new schools. Even though it's at the same level, they better show up and produce right away, because they're both, they're not guys who've now been there for a couple of years who the coaches have been kind of working with for a while and care about for a fact. It's no, you're new, so yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Enjoy the ride, guys.
Yeah, as Ross Warren says in the comment section, a bunch of young men got taken advantage of. That's sad for them, but an important life lesson. Like, again, on the surface, I'm happy Hayden John found a home. I'm glad that he's not going to be one of those cases of a guy leaves thinking he's going to go get greener pastures and then just never plays again. Like, glad he found a place to land. But man, I think of like Nick Josephek posted some photos in an Eastern Oregon jersey and had an official visit there. I would assume he lands on his feet. But then you get to the guys like, Emerson Cortez Menjivar hasn't posted a single thing. I don't know what he thought he was going to find. I don't know if he was told, hey, Idaho doesn't want you, get the fuck out of here. But I look at it as that's a guy who had, had playing time sporadically over the last couple of years, obviously has had some injury issues. I'm not saying he would have won a job here. We know that the receiver room is completely in flux. I wouldn't say anybody has locked in a position there, but he's one of currently 9 Vandals that left for this last year's team and are in the portal without any news or announcements of where they're going. And I'm not insane. Not all 9 of those guys are going to get to play football again. There's going to be at least one of those guys that just never steps foot on the field again. And that sucks. Like that's too bad for guys like that. Crewhead 76. Look for Irwin to be back in the portal next year or rocking special teams the rest of his career. And that's the other thing, man. Matt Irwin took a P4 job. Hey, awesome, man. I hope you got what you wanted. I don't know if it was pay. I don't know if it was play. I can't imagine it was play, but if he finds the way onto the field there, man, more power to him. But it's just it's a sad thing, Brian, to see guys, like you said, when you're in the portal, like you have done everything you're going to for the University of Idaho. Not a lot of these guys did much for the University of Idaho. I don't mean that in a negative way. Like obviously there's blood, sweat, and tears. There's practice. There's so much of a time commitment there just being on the team. But your production on the field for a lot of these guys was non-existent. And then they hit the portal and they just become empty names in a sea of thousands upon thousands.
Yeah, for me to put a button on it, I've just seen Thomas Ford message about this. For the dudes who are in the portal, if you are looking to move down because you want to see the field, that's probably the right call. And if you are moving up because you are pretty damn sure that you've got an offer coming, okay, that can make sense. Those two groups of people do not equate to the majority of the guys who come in. It looks like a lot of guys come in without a real plan other than my bullshit agent or my MLM agent told me that there were going to be some opening. Just not the case. Sucks that this is what we have to live through, but this is where we're at. And until people start to learn to accurately assess where they're at, we're going to see stuff like this. I will point to Joshua Wood, I think, as an example of, I think some positions are going to figure out how to do this earlier than others. You look at the many quarterbacks who left good places at the FCS to essentially have their careers end. Giovanni McCoy at Idaho is an example of that. Reese Poffenbarger, he somehow has another year of eligibility, but whatever. I'm not a scholar on Poffenbarger. He's now gone. He went from Albany to Miami to not play, to North Texas to not play, and now he's at Akron. Akron is not a better school than top tier FCS schools, but so, I mean, fingers crossed for him. He gets a chance to play, but we've seen a lot of guys trade, developing a legacy, staying with a coaching staff who cares about you and wants you to develop for fingers crossed, hope this works. Where's the money? And for a lot of guys, it's not going to work. I do think quarterback is a place that's going to mellow out a little. Look at the rest of the big sky. Keely Lee Ayat staying, Justin Lamson staying. Caden Pinnock did leave. But he's very likely going to be a starter at Washington State. So, that one makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, just the final little cherry there, Brian. James TA in the comment section. These guys could play college football again. It's just that most of them are too proud to drop a level after being D1. Rocco made the right choice. I mean, fully agree. Rocco Koch going to an NAIA school, man, good for you for knowing, like, I want to be a quarterback. I want to play. You drop down completely out of the NCAA. Like, do what you got to play. It's the guys that are like, I gotta find my playing time. But you know, if you couldn't see the field at Idaho, what makes you think you're going to see the field at Eastern? Like, you know, hopefully someday we will be talking about all of this as a small speck of dust that didn't matter because they finally figured out NIL and the transfer portal. And that would require the NCAA being competent. So it's not going to happen, but it's nice to have dreams. Brian, we're halfway through this show and it's time. If you are looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, don't look past your backyard. It's the 50th anniversary of Hughes River Expeditions, and they're ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip like one to see the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of No Return, the Salmon River Canyons, or even the Selway. You can check out the special trips like the one to go see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs. And guys, same thing I say every week. Fish the most remote stretches of river in the entire United States. All you have to do is bring your clothes. HRE will take care of everything else. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450 or check them out at hughesriver.com. Brian, as we are running solo today, no producer redacted, Martin Heemstra, the brick wall himself. He is off at a Nickelback show. So he left us some notes for women's basketball.
And I did my best to watch as well, dudes. So the Idaho women's team, productive this last week, went 2-0 with wins at home against Weber State and Idaho State. Idaho State first. The Vandals beat the Bengals 81-68. Now, Idaho State on the women's side, Sean Sobolewski, coach at Idaho State, is relatively famous in the Big Sky for one, being a good coach. Teams are always competitive. Two, his teams will try to slow it down a little bit. They will try to make the game a little bit ugly. And Idaho didn't have a ton of trouble with that. And I bring that up because Idaho plays a pretty fast style. They're the number 2 scoring team in the Big Sky in Big Sky conference play. They're scoring right around they're at 75 points a game right now. Montana State, who is the runaway favorite to win the conference, they're averaging 81. But Idaho plays faster. Sometimes in that clash of styles, teams that can slow it down a little bit can gum things up for teams who want to move the ball. But Idaho State was not able to impose their will on this game. The result was not really in doubt for the most part throughout the entire game. The Vandals were led by Anna Pinheiro, 14 points and 6 rebounds, and Kyra Gardner, 13 points as well. Off the bench, Debora Dos Santos scores 12 points in 24 minutes, picks up 10 rebounds. That's actually I want to highlight that 24 minutes. Getting Dos Santos to 24 to 25 minutes a night for this team, I think, is a huge deal for the Vandals, finishing in maybe that number 2 spot in the conference and then, positioning themselves for a run. Montana State will be the favorite essentially no matter what this season. But we have seen in, Big Sky Conference tournament play, one can go down. So, it's not like everything's over by any means. Idaho picking up that win over Idaho State. Those two teams are pretty dang close in your NCAA net ratings. As of right now, your Vandals are the number 2 team in the Big Sky at 122 in the nation out of 363. Idaho State sits at 126 out of 363. Montana State, just as a contrast, they're number 68. So the Montana State women legitimately are making a realistic claim for an at-large bid if they somehow do not win the conference tournament. But all that to say, Idaho women looked quite good. Idaho State's a solid team to pick up a convincing win over. And also want to highlight Ana Beatriz Pastos Alvarez. Forgive me. She has like a
Alves.
My bad. She has like 15 names, guys. This one's not on me. She put up 13 points off the bench in 19 minutes. So that's 4 Vandal women in double figures. Weber State is a different story. Weber State women suck. I am trying to tell you what their NCAA net rating is, but I have to scroll down really, really far to get there. They're 264.
264.
Yeah.
0-6 in conference play, 6-13 overall, Brian.
Yeah. Idaho wins this one 95-76. And this game really not in doubt whatsoever. Ana Pinheiro, 16 points. Kyra Gardner, 27 points on 8 of 16 from the field, including 8 of 11 from the free throw line, also picked up 8 boards. And then Dos Santos again, 12 points off the bench, 12 rebounds this time. She played 20 minutes. So again, Dos Santos being able to play a little more than half the game or half the game is going to be big for Idaho this year. Mm-hmm. That's probably her ceiling of minutes. But she is one of the most talented players in the Big Sky. Coach Moreira is doing his best to make sure that she actually sees it all the way through this season and can be an impact player into the postseason. So, takeaways, from these couple games. I mean, first off, Dos Santos was named Big Sky Women's Player of the Week for averaging a double-double in these 2 games. So congrats to her for the recognition. She's been a person we've been talking on this show all season. We know she doesn't start, but she's one of the most talented players on the floor. Whenever she's on the floor, pay attention to her. Second, Ana Beatriz Paseos Alves, adding a little extra off the bench. She only had, she had 7 against Weber State, but across those 2 games, that's, if there's 2 players averaging right around double figures off the bench, that's letting you know how deep this team is. And then, just from the starters, you're going to see Kyra Gardner and Hope Hassman probably trade off games of who's one of the leading scorers from the guard position. Against Idaho State, Hope Hassman had rougher game, went 2-9, put up 9 points. But then against Weber State, she scores 14 points. Honestly, against Weber State, Hope Hassman, Kyra Gardner combined for 41 points at the guard position. So you're getting production like that. That's meaningful. We'll say one minor item of concern I have is Lorena Barbosa at center. She's productive when she's on the floor, but she's having trouble staying on the floor with fouls. So she's obviously she's the tallest player Idaho has. So, and she's another San Francisco transfer. We want to see, you need her on the floor as much as you can. The other thing is Santos is only able to play 20, 25-ish minutes. The Vandals probably want one of those 2 on the floor as much as they can. So look, it's nothing but good news here, picking up those 2 convincing wins. But I guess the one thing I'm concerned about is Barbosa gonna? She's another version, I guess. Dos Santos' health is the issue with getting to 20-25 minutes. Barbosa's got to be able to be on the floor 20-25 minutes as well. The issue for her has just been foul trouble.
Mm-hmm. Brian, I just wanted to quickly point out double Deb over there. It's the 3rd Vandal woman to win Big Sky Conference Player of the Week this year, after Kyra Gardner did it in November 12th, I think, and then Hope Hassman did it the week after that. So really, Moreira is building over there, because this is a pretty damn good program, guys.
Yeah, the Idaho women sit at 13-5 on the season, 4-1 in Big Sky play. Their only loss to Montana State, who is the top team in the conference. The Bobcats sit at 6-0. To round out just like your kind of top 4-ish teams right now, Northern Colorado sitting at 5-2 in conference, Idaho State sitting at 4-2 in conference. And this week, the Vandals will be traveling to Sacramento State, Sac with a silent K, Sacramento State, and Portland State on the Thursday and Saturday.
Which means the men will be teams in Moscow, Idaho, Sacramento's taint, and Portland's taint. But Brian, any final thoughts on the women's team before we get to what happened with the first half of the battle for King Spot?
No, other than to say, I hope we get more student support. The community is showing up okay for the women at home. I saw some pictures from the student section and just some clips from the game where it was disappointing to say the least. The attendance, like women's basketball, almost universally doesn't get the same level of attention as men do. So I mean, that itself is not a shock. And I will say this season, the men, I haven't seen the student section light the world on fire yet this season on the men's side. But on the, for the men, you can understand, well, like, look, this is maybe the first year Idaho's going to have a winning season since 2017. We've been teaching people to not care for a long time. We've got a really good women's team there. So it'd be cool to see more support. We'll see how that happens. We've been doing our part on the show, as I'm sure our listeners have figured out. We're trying to be as close. It's not exactly 50-50, but we're trying to get as close to 50-50 coverage, men and women, as we reasonably can. So hopefully it gets better. James TA in the comment section, there were about 5 people in the student section against ISU. It's freaking ridiculous. We'll also say the women are why Idaho has a narrow lead in bringing the King Spud Trophy back. If you guys don't remember, the winner of the King Spud Trophy is now based off of the season series combined record between the men and women, Idaho versus Idaho State. If it's a tie break, it goes down to point differential. So because of the women right now, Idaho has, I believe, like a 5-point lead in point differential.
Brian, in the comment section, Ross Warren saying, I may or may not be offering extra credit in my course for attending the games. So if you out there know Mr. Ross Warren, please, for the love of God, start going to these games and get your grades up. Brian, that takes us to Sad Panda Hour. Idaho versus Idaho State. You've already kind of buried the lead there. Tell me what happened.
Well, okay, I'm not going to say it's precisely Sad Panda Hour, the men's team over the break. So this time Idaho men, they of course on the inverse, they traveled to Idaho State and traveled to Weber State. And we saw, against Montana State, the men had this template out of nowhere of just completely shitting the bed the entire first half. And then mounting a furious comeback. It worked. It did not work against Montana. It did work against Montana State. It was a different order this time of Idaho looking pretty good in the first half in both these games. Led by different amounts each one. The Weber State game, the Wildcats shot like 12% in the first half. Idaho should have been up by like 25, but they were up by 13. Against Idaho State, at the half, what I think it was Dallas. I think you have that in front of you.
37-36 Idaho State at the half.
Yeah. Okay. So a narrow lead over Idaho State. But then, in different points in the second half in both these games, Idaho did their shit the bed thing again. So against Idaho State, it was the last 10 minutes of the game. Just the offense was completely worthless. There are about 9 consecutive garbage possessions while Idaho got essentially no stops, and a 5-point lead turned into the Vandals ended up losing by 8. So they led by 5 with about 8-ish minutes left in the game and completely shit the bed to close. On the night, Jackson Rasmussen leads Idaho with 19 points on 11 shots, picked up 5 boards as well. Brody Robry, 9 points, and Isaiah Brickner, 12 points off the bench. Of note, also, look, this has been a fact in some of the games where Idaho struggled. Biko Johnson and Colton Mitchell are 2 of the better scorers in Big Sky play in the conference. Just talking conference play right now, Biko Johnson's the number 6 scorer in the league. Colton Mitchell's the number 7 scorer in the league. Both are averaging just over 17 points in conference play. But those 2 have had a few games where they just both no-show. Like, again, it happened against Montana. It happened again against Idaho State, where Biko Johnson, Colton Mitchell combined to shoot 6 of 22, including 2 of 13 from 3. Idaho as a whole shot 4 of 26 from behind the arc against Idaho State. That was part of the come apart, is Idaho quit getting looks inside, specifically with Jackson Rasmussen, started settling for easy shit. And it just the wheels completely fell off. Then against Weber State, as I brought up, Weber State, complete garbage in the first half. Idaho should have been up by 25. They're up by 13. Idaho shit the bed the first 10 minutes of that game and looked like they were ready to completely give the game away. The Vandals did rebound to hold on for a 75-67 win. That is a pretty good win. Weber State sits at 4-2 in Big Sky play. That brings Idaho up to 3-2 in conference play, 11-7 overall. In spite of any consternation you're hearing out of me about this Vandal team, and Coach Alex Pribble talked about it in his pressers, has not been able to put together a 40-minute game. And I don't mean 40 minutes of perfect ball. If I'm going to paraphrase Pribble, it's more, no, like it's not the team isn't playing a 40-minute game. It's they're finding 10 to 20-minute chunks of time where they're just completely shitting the bed, looking like I don't know what they think they're doing in practice. Like against Idaho State, they look solid for 3/4 of that game, and then they just became someone they had not been the entire night. Same thing with Weber. Good in the first half. Don't know what in God's name they thought they were doing to start the second half. Then they held on, at the end, changed things up. But that's I guess what you're looking for before we hit the individual contributions for the Weber State game is for this Idaho team to be who I believe they can be. They got to figure out how to not just have those moments where they come apart. Tom Kendall saying live and die by the three. Okay, Tom, I agree and disagree. The way I agree is when Idaho starts to get complacent and take way too quick threes or take threes without putting pressure on the defense. That's when they die. But when they're doing well, that's not what they're doing offensively. It has been a clear point of emphasis for Idaho to put pressure on the defense, get the ball to guys like Jackson Rasmussen. By the way, that translated into the Weber State game. Rasmussen, 16 points on 6-15 from the field, 5 rebounds. Did have 6 turnovers. That's a freshman issue. Biko Johnson really did carry Idaho this game, 26 points, 8-14 from the field, 6 rebounds, and Colton Mitchell, 12 points on 5 of 11 shooting. He had some timely shots, but Colton Mitchell had a rough stretch from 3, went 4 of 16 on this trip from deep. But anyway, I'm still relatively high on Idaho, but a huge asterisk because this is a team that they look Montana State is looking like the maybe number 2 team in the conference right now, or potentially number 1 team in the conference on the men's side, not in a convincing way like on the women's side. But this is a Vandal team that trailed Montana State by 21 at home and won. Montana State probably feels like they fell apart that game, but like Idaho doesn't win that game if there's not some talent on this team. But they do have a way of coming apart. Tom Kendall saying Idaho number 2 in 3-point field goal attempt. Oh, well, we know Idaho's going to shoot threes. Like that's how this is, Tom. I'm just saying when Idaho's falling apart, it's when they're settling. This team is going to shoot threes, but this team has spent more time putting a concerted effort into getting closer looks. What I'm going to point to is Jackson Rasmussen. We talked about it last week. It had his run of teams had kind of figured out how to pay attention to him. So how is he going to respond? And also how's Pribble going to respond to try to get Rasmussen better looks? And I think it's fair to say Rasmussen was pretty damn good where Idaho is giving him a lot more post touches instead of outside touches. And I think that's the right call because he is a matchup nightmare for a ton of the Big Sky. He's too tall for wings and guards, and he's going to be too fast and also too skilled for some Big Sky posts. But my other kind of Achilles heel, I just don't think this is going to go away for Idaho. The Vandal men just kind of suck at the free throw line. Shot 65% from the charity stripe in both games. 10 of 31 against the Bengals, 31 attempts from the free throw line. You gotta capitalize on that, guys. And then 17 at 8. That's exactly 65% in both games. But, Tom, I guess what I want to look at, Tom, you're talking about 3-point field goal attempts. And hey, Tom is not wrong to point to that as, something to pay attention to for the Vandals. This is in conference play. The Vandals have in conference play, the Vandals have the 5th most 3-point attempt right now. The problem for Idaho is they're shooting 30%. This is just not that good a 3 shooting team. It's a team that needs to shoot better threes. The numbers that we saw. I mean, again, look, Idaho State, that was catastrophe. But the Vandals shot significantly better from 3 against Weber, and they were 8 of 25. I just think the jury's in. This is a team that if the threes are open, take them. This is not an elite shooting team. This is a team that just cannot settle for threes. That's when their offense just starts to look like garbage, because that's essentially by design. This is not a team of sharpshooters, and some of the guys who contributed last year. Payne has struggled immensely this year, and he's not getting the type of volume he got last year, where he was averaging 11. He was averaging 11 points a game last season. He's not averaging half of that right now, and honestly, when Payne shoots catch and shoot threes from the wing, he looks like he's shooting like 5% on them. So I really think that this team is in the process of kind of sorting their identity. I do think there was an obvious concerted effort to make Rasmussen one of the, if not the number 1 option, the number 2 option in the last couple games. And that worked clearly. And I think, Biko Johnson and Colton Mitchell, I think they are both going to have hot, cold nights. They just can't both be cold at the same time.
Brian, coming in from the stats department here, that ISU game, Jack Payne hits a 3 20 seconds in to give Idaho the lead, at which point they don't relinquish. They keep that lead until they are up 5 with 7:37 to go, and promptly go 1 of 10 from beyond the arc on their way to losing that game. So I think that's again, as you just discussed, but that is the die by the 3 point that Tom Kendall is pointing out. Idaho up 5 with 7.5 to go. Jack up 10 threes and missed 9 of them.
Yeah, I think if Tom were on the show, we're essentially saying the same thing, because I don't think Tom is saying that Idaho shoots. I think what Tom is saying is when Idaho looks like they're 3 hunting, that's when their offense goes to hell. They're going to shoot threes. This is modern basketball. So, but I'm guessing that's what Tom's actually getting at, which if that's what he's getting at, that's my point too. And Tom says, yes, you're right. No, Tom and I are on the exact same page in different words, man.
Yeah. Just one of those stats that's hard to stomach when you're like, oh, you were up 5 with less than a quarter of the game to go, and you jacked up 10 threes. And again, that was rough. It was, I'm not the biggest basketball fan in the world, and it's moments like that make it really hard to keep it on my TV some days. But like you said, Brian, the women did at least beat Idaho State more than the men lost by. So there is the slightest margin of victory for the Vandals so far in the first half of the King's Bud battle.
Yeah, and this week, Idaho is going to be home against Sac with a silent K-State and Portland State. Those 2 games are kind of interesting for different reasons. Sacramento State had looked terrible virtually the entire season, but the last couple games, the Hornets have been without leading scorer Mikey Williams. And look, I've watched Sacramento State when Mikey Williams playing. He's a relatively famous high recruit who got into some legal trouble. That's why he's at Sacramento State. He's a set of golden handcuffs. Very talented player, not a very good shooter, dominates the ball a ton. Sacramento State is offensively complacent when Mikey Williams is on the floor, which is to say, I hope he is healthy for the Idaho game. He also doesn't really play any defense either. Without Mikey Williams playing, Sac State is sitting at 2-0 with wins over Northern Arizona and Northern Colorado this last week. One thing that did not change, Sacramento State doesn't really guard anyone. And I just to change, however, with Mikey Williams not dominating the ball, the actual best player for Sacramento State getting far more looks. That's Prophet Johnson. He's another transfer. He's been kind of all over the place, and most recently, I think Southern Utah before here. But he scored 29 again in the win over Northern Arizona, and then the win over Northern Colorado. Johnson led Sacramento State with 30. So that's, that's a completely different offensive look when Mikey Williams is not in the driver's seat. Portland State, on the other hand, they're the number 1 NCAA net team in the Big Sky, which they're sitting right now at, I think I killed the wrong window. Yeah, I definitely killed the wrong window. They're around 130th. Glad we get to produce in public like this. Oh, sorry. No, I actually didn't screw that one up. They're the number 2 team in the Big Sky at number 137. I was just floored that Montana State was somehow the number 1 NCAA net rated team in the Big Sky. Portland State at 137. They're sitting at 8-5 versus D1 teams. Your Vandals are number 159, sitting at 8-7 versus D1 teams, 11-7 on the year. That still look. This Idaho team is still on at this point. They're still on pace for most wins we've had in a long time. I said this last homestand. Last homestand against the Montana schools. I felt that was kind of a must-win territory. And then this, look, at some point, Idaho, if they're going to be competing for that top 3-ish spot in the conference, they're going to have to not split games. I think this is going to be tough for Idaho to pick up a win over Portland State. Portland State is a very athletic and pretty big team. And that can be a matchup issue for Idaho. The Portland State was a terrible matchup for Idaho last year. And of course, the rosters are a little bit different, but both Portland State and Idaho largely kept the core of last year's teams intact. Sac State, that's a must win because the Vandals cannot go 0-2 in any sort of homestands if we're going to be talking about competing for one of those better spots in the Big Sky Conference tournament. The matchup with Sac State is a lot better. There are some athletes on Sac State, but the jury the evidence Mike Bibby is given as a head coach right now is very inconclusive. Prior to these last 2 games, he looked like a guy who did well in high school because he was able to have elite high school players, and that took care of itself. This was a team that looked shitty on offense and shitty on defense. Things did change a little bit these last 2 games, so I don't know if that just means getting Mikey Williams out actually allows Sacramento State to run an actual offense, which is why I really hope Williams is back. But Portland State, that I think is going to be the tougher out of those 2. Both those games are going to be at ICCU this week. I will be there for the Portland State game this Saturday, as always. Certainly encouraging people to get into Moscow to watch a game. When the fans get behind this team, ICCU is a kick-ass electric place to be. And in spite of what we talked about, the up and down nature of this team, this is still easily the best Idaho team we've seen since 2017. Mm-hmm. So hot take, I'm getting behind this team. So if you can make it, love to see you there.
Again, guys, it's Sacramento State Thursday night, 6:00. Portland State Saturday day game, 2:00. Again, as is tradition, pretty similar times as every other game. So, Vandal women on the road, Vandal men at home, and then we will see the women back for Northern Arizona, January 31st. They will be back in the ICCU arena. So a little bit of time before we see the women again. Brian, go ahead.
Do you have to hit the comment section? Tom Kendall doubling is the crack stat team for us, talking about Shakir O'Neal, Shaq's son, who starts for Sacramento State. He's more of an energy guy. He gets a couple lob dunks, maybe can make wide open catch and shoot shots, but he's not that much of an impact player. Sam Buffington, noted journalist who usually gets stuff right, accused Shakir of being a freshman. He is definitely a senior, as Tom Kendall says, but that is neither here nor there. And Sam Buffington acknowledging in the comment section, Tom knows ball.
Tom does, in fact, no ball. James T.A. also dropping in track meet this weekend. You can find the schedule on govandals.com. So, again, guys, we're starting to eke into seeing more of those spring sports start popping up as the weather is just about to shift in Moscow. I say that, and it means it's going to snow until May, as it does pretty much any time I say that. But winter is winding down. We are getting ever closer to Starch Madness. Brian, any final thoughts before we adjourn?
I just want to say Brody Robry, as a starter at Post for Idaho, he's really stepping into pretty solid contributor, averaging like right around 8 to 10 points a game in Big Sky play. Noted something worth paying attention to, because Pribble seems to just going to be a shitty free throw shooting team. In the late against Weber, Robry, when Weber was pressing at the end of the game, Robry was actually put in as a guard for the press break so that he could be fouled and shoot free throws. He's shooting about 80% on the year, if he's one of the top free throw shooters for Idaho. But Robry as a transfer has been pretty solid. Still no update on Christian Gonzalez. hope to see him play because I think he's would be a difference maker for this team. He looked like it would be in the one game he got to play against Washington State. Without him, honestly, the bench has just kind of been it's still trying to figure itself out. Jack Payne is starting. And Jack Payne, especially post injury, he has just not looked the same as far as contributing on really either side of the ball. But which means he's like the number 4 or 5 option. So I just think he needs to kind of default to go back to being an energy guy like he had been for kind of the start of last season. But you look at the bench production and Isaiah Brickner and Seth Joba are kind of it as far as getting much from the bench right now. And Brickner is he's definitely up or down. He can have his moments where he looks strong, but in that run of awful offense against Idaho State, Brickner was absolutely guilty of about 3 atrocious possessions. So getting Christian Gonzalez will stabilize Idaho if we can get him back this year. And I also just think against some teams, a 3-guard lineup of Mitchell, Johnson, and Gonzalez with Rasmussen in the post and Robry is going to be tough for a lot of teams. Also, if you sub out Robry and have Joba in there, you can essentially surround Rasmussen in the post with 4 shooters that I don't know if that team can guard anyone, but I don't know any Big Sky team who would stop a team like that from putting points up. So we're going to see. Tom Kendall saying he's been impressed with Biko this year. I have to. Biko off the dribble has been very good this season. It's weird that Biko and Colton Mitchell complement each other quite well. As in Mitchell can be a little bit more of an electric shooter from deep. Biko's been solid from deep. But Biko has been a little bit more effective off the bounce, while Mitchell most certainly has his moments. But those two, when those two are good, Idaho's a very tough team to stop. We've just in the last 2 weeks, we've had 2 games where both of them no show. And when that happens, it's just going to be tough for Idaho to pick up W's.
With that said, Brian, 6 games left to see Vandal men's basketball in the ICCU arena. Again, that's 2 games this weekend. Then we've got 2 games over the Valentine's weekend, and then 2 games to end February out before the men head off to Starch Madness. The women have 7 games remaining. 7 home games remaining. They do not come back home until January 31st against Northern Arizona. So only a handful of options left to go see the Vandals in ICCU arena.
Holy shit. No, sorry, you're right. It just blows me away that there's 6 home games left. That's it.
So we are in the thick of it. The Big Sky season is coming to an end real fast, Brian.
Well, the other part was Idaho started the Big Sky season with 3 home games when everyone's gone, which, look, someone's going to do that. That's just kind of like shit luck of the draw, but that's part of why it feels that way is a lot of people don't travel during those times. So there you go. But just sometimes these seasons, like I say it during football all the time, but basketball has a different way of flying by because like the first part of it, we're paying attention to football. And then you hit another part of it over the holidays, and then suddenly, like, okay, like we're ready to go. It's like, Christ, we're in the last third of the season. Good Lord.
Third of it already. Exactly. We will be back next week on Tubbs at the Club with more news, hopefully with that news about the new special teams coordinator as Idaho Vandal football looks to fill out the coaching staff and prepare for 2026. Brian and hopefully Martin will be back to talk about Sack's taint and Portland's taint. Brian, as always,
go Vandals.
And my computer froze. Good.
This is producer Brian doing a terrible job of even finding what we're going to play us out with. So we're just going to call it good. See you guys Tuesday. Motherfucker.
Go Vandals.